lawyers are, in which every lawyer in America thinks he'd be a fool to testify. Judge Ellis gave a pretty good indication that he might toss the case for government misconduct, that he might even have authority to conduct this investigation.
And that's Judge Ellis. Really made huge news on Friday. Rudy Giuliani doubling down. By the way, no questions about that from George Stephanopoulos. But he doubled down, did Rudy, on his calls to end the special counsel's probe as a federal judge deals a blow to Mueller's case. It's stunning. Fox News contributor and former Republican Congressman Jason Chaffetz served as on the Oversight Committee, where he was chairman of the Reform Committee. All right, Congressman, how big a deal is this?
It's a real big deal because, look, the improbable election of Donald Trump is not probable cause to pursue him. They've got to follow evidence. They got to follow, the truth. But the question is, what is it that started this initial probe? And it's become so far and so wide for Judge Ellis to push back on this and say, show us the scope memo. They've got to provide that. They won't provide it to Congress, but they've got to provide it to the judge.
In layman's terms, the scope memo is, just tell me what your mandate is. What did Rod Rosenstein give you and tell you what to do? So they say, we're not going to give it to you. And they go, we're going to give it to you, but we're going to redact it. Judge goes, no, you're not going to redact it. Give it to me. Come back here with the scope memo. And then something else happened on Friday and was ruled on Saturday. They came out and said, you know what, with that whole Russian troll farm, when they handed out all those indictments, I guess they didn't think these people were going to fight back. So one of them is Concord Management Consulting. And they said when they started fighting back, Mueller's team asked for a delay. And Judge Dabney Frederick goes, no, not going to delay. I'm not going to give you a reason. Just go do it. Present your case. So they're getting a little bit of pushback finally, and it's not from a pundit on this channel.
Well, look, they're filing charges, and then they come up to their hearing and they say, well, we're not ready yet. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to the average person. And Judge Ellis, I love the fact that he's pushing back. You don't get unfettered access to go surf anywhere and every place. You pursue the truth. You pursue justice, but you do that through facts and evidence, and let that be where you go, not just, hey, let's go, Donald Trump, this is your life. Let's go look at every single aspect. You have to have probable cause.
And, Chairman, finally, that's what leads most legal experts to say there's no way the president should sit with Mueller, and if pushed, he shouldn't, if subpoenaed, he still shouldn't show. Let the courts deal with it. Now you understand.
Yeah, look, I think most people think that, but I think Donald Trump also does things differently than anybody else, and I think in his heart of hearts he wants to sit down, he wants to make his case, and he wants to explain why he doesn't believe that there's any sort of collusion whatsoever.
Chairman, thanks so much for getting up with us.
All right, welcome back. Robert Mueller's Russian troll farm indictment could face an embarrassing dismissal here. A second judge dealing another major blow to the Mueller probe as the president's supporters question its constitutionality altogether.
The president will not sit down for an interview because this investigation has now reached a level of bad faith. This is no longer a good faith investigation.
I have my doubts. I think Paul Manafort's attorneys have a point that there is a limit to what an independent counsel, in my case with Ken Starr, with President Clinton, and a special counsel, really the same issue. I don't know whether that line has been crossed.
All right, here to make sense of all of this is former CIA operative Mike Baker. Mike, thanks so much for coming in early this morning.
Sure,
first question we want to ask you. We've got two different things here. We've got the Mueller probe regarding the Manafort and the 2005. The bank fraud case, and then you also have the Russian troll farm. Both of these got hit pretty hard in the last couple of days. Tell us what the scope of this is.
Right, yeah, most people have probably not really paid much attention to this Russian troll farm issue, but essentially Mueller and his team obtained an indictment against 3 Russian companies and 13 Russian individuals. And essentially the indictment says, look, these individuals and the companies were involved in manipulation or an effort to manipulate the 2016 election. And that's, 30,000 feet level. That's what lots of people think about. They think of Russian meddling in social media, et cetera. And so that's what that case is about. It's in a sort of a legal battle right now. Mueller's team wanted a delay based on some sort of technicalities over whether the summons had been, actually obtained by the folks
whether
listed
or not
in the
they
indictment.
received them, because I guess the Russians wouldn't help to deliver those summons, right?
Right. Well, the Russian government looks at it, and again, the Russian government's not going to do us any favors, as they didn't do us any favors for a long time, and they're not going to assist with that unless it's absolutely required by the terms of a legal treaty that we've got. So that's going to bubble away under the surface. The Manafort case, is if you look at both of these in a sense, it's what special prosecutors do. It's what Mueller and his team, in a sense, are doing what we always see special investigations do. They range all over the place. Right. At a certain point, they collect so much mass, so much lumbering mass in terms of resources and time that they've invested into it, budget that they're putting into it, that they're all over the place looking for something essentially to justify their existence.
Right. And in this case, this is Paul Manafort, who, a lot of people on the left think was behind the grand collusion theory that they have, that he was the one communicating with the Russians, trying to swing this election his way. And they find this bank fraud case from 13 years ago now, and this judge, one judge who was actually a Reagan appointee, says you can't use this to try and make a case here. This is too old, right?
Right. You've got a Reagan appointee judge making those comments, and it really almost in an unprecedented fashion, and certainly publicly, coming out and talking about what Mueller's team is doing here and the reason why they're going after Manafort, which again, has really nothing to do with the collusion issue. The judge making the comments related to the Russian troll farm, that's a Trump-appointed judge. Again, it's kind of, you're in the weeds of legalese, and that's not definitely my area of expertise.
Right. And let's get into one more thing here. We've got Gina Haspel. The CIA needs a new director. Mike Pompeo is now Secretary of State. She has a confirmation hearing coming, but she's been tied to this waterboarding, enhanced interrogation. How do you think this goes?
Well, I think it's going to be bruising. I think if it was any other administration that had chosen Gina Haspel, I think they would be praised for a rock-solid choice. First female to lead the CIA. Look, she's got 30-plus years of operational and very solid management experience. She knows the intel community. She's independent-minded, very strong-minded. An excellent choice for this. But because we're in the times that we're in, the Democrats want to relitigate this. They view it politically as good for them to relitigate the rendition program. She's already been absolved of any responsibility for that by, in fact, a number of the Dems that are going to be going through the confirmation hearing.
Does she
and they also view it as politically good for them to just bash the current administration.
And real quick, do you think she gets through? Is she confirmed?
I do believe she will get through, because at the end of the day, even the highly partisan people on Capitol Hill have to see that she's an excellent choice. And so I hope for the good of the American people, they will make that decision.
Mike, thank you so much for coming on this morning. We appreciate it.
For more on this, let's get some legal advice. Let's turn to Caroline Polisi. She's a white-collar criminal defense attorney. Caroline, welcome. So first of all, do you think that Mueller does have the legal authority to subpoena the President of the United States?
Well, he certainly has the authority to do so. The question is whether or not the president will refute that subpoena. And there isn't a specific on-point legal decision. Of course, everybody is referencing Nixon, referencing Clinton. The Nixon case, which did go all the way up to the Supreme Court, had to do with documents, right? A subpoena for documents, a subpoena for the tapes. And there, the Supreme Court said that certainly the president is not above the law. So by all indications, one would assume that you could sort of take that decision and apply it to testimony as well. But in the case of Bill Clinton, remember, he voluntarily decided to give testimony before the grand jury via video. So he did question the subpoena power, but ultimately the question was never resolved to the Supreme Court, so we don't really know the answer.
If this were to go to the Supreme Court, I mean, what's your best gut feeling? Would it follow the transcript?
Yes, my gut feeling is that absolutely, and I think that everybody's on the same page here. Even Alan Dershowitz has agreed that likely the Supreme Court would rule that in this instance, many, if not most, of the questions that Mueller wanted to ask the president would fall under sort of the purview of yes, saying that the president is not above the law. He would have to testify before the grand jury. Now, the interesting issue here, as we were talking about before, is taking the fifth. And Giuliani has just intimated that if pressed, the president may have to take the fifth. And that opens up a whole really interesting avenue.
Well, you got the legal aspect and the political aspect. Let's take the legal one first. I mean, it's everyone's right to plead the Fifth Amendment and not to incriminate yourself. And just because you take it, it has been pointed out by many counselors, does not mean that you're guilty.
That's right. I say that all the time. I'm a criminal defense attorney, so I like to point that out to people. I think in the court of public opinion, and Trump himself has obviously, spoken on this issue.
Only mob guys,
only mob people take the fifth. It means you're guilty. It doesn't. But so the issue here has to do with the sort of counter card that Mueller could then play, which is grant Trump immunity. I don't think he will, but if he were, look, if you take away the threat of a criminal prosecution and say, look, I'm granting you immunity, and likely Mueller is operating under this Office of Legal Counsel memorandum, which states that a sitting president actually cannot be indicted. So there's that extra sort of element there, sort of pushing him a little bit towards potentially giving him immunity. In that case, President Trump would be forced to testify. And the fact is, you can't get immunity from impeachment proceedings. So that the answer to those questions could be used against him in any sort of impeachment proceeding.
So to say that once again, the president could potentially ask for immunity, get it from Mueller, but what he would say in any investigation could then be used against him in an impeachment proceeding?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely.
What are the chances you think of this? I mean...
So my gut instinct is that Mueller is not going to give him immunity. I really do think that Trump has a bargaining chip here. When Giuliani's talking about the potential of having a voluntary interview, I think that is a bargaining tool, the prospect, the threat of taking the fifth, because I don't see Mueller wanting to grant immunity, because he likely would if he does think that there are criminal charges here, he likely wants to charge them.
Yeah, he's saying no prosecutor if they really think they have a case.
Right.
I mean,
right.
He's discussed whether or not the president is not a target. There isn't any indication now in any way, as I understand it, that the president is exactly a target.
That's right. But, and I've said this before, in these types of investigations, the subject-target distinction is oftentimes a distinction without a difference. Okay. It's an on-the-ground assessment at the time. And again, going back to that Office of Legal Counsel memo, it may not be the case that he's simply not a target because there isn't enough evidence to pursue a case. It may simply be the case that he's not a target because Mueller doesn't believe that a sitting president can be indicted. You're a target essentially right before that indictment comes out.
Okay. Meanwhile, Judge T.S. Ellis, amazing. Man, he really gave it to the Mueller investigators during the hearing on Friday. Were you surprised at that? He criticized to their face and questioned whether or not that they were going after the president to impeach him. That's exactly what he said.
I was shocked. This was a bombshell. This is the first time really in open court we've ever seen in a court of law a questioning of Robert Mueller's authority. T.S. Ellis is kind of a well-known judge in the Eastern District of Virginia. He's bombastic. He says things of this nature, but really sort of unprecedented for a judge to be this candid. Now, I don't think it's a threat to the ultimate prosecution, because the remedy in this case would be a dismissal of the indictment without prejudice, meaning that another branch or another office in the Department of Justice could eventually bring that case. The question is whether or not it should fall under the special counsel's ambit.
Yeah, but the prosecutor then retorted that he said that they're looking into allegations of Russian interference and a connection, a possible conspiracy. And he made it quite clear that that's what they're doing in Manafort's case.
Yes.
Versus the case up here that's gone to the Southern District in New York, which deals with Michael Cohen.
Exactly. So the Michael Cohen SDNY investigation, as you noted, was a referral from the special counsel's office. And I think that really speaks to sort of the un-witch hunt-like nature of this investigation, in that, look, Robert Mueller saw potentially the crimes that were committed here and said, you know what, this really doesn't fall under my mandate. I'm going to refer this out to another prosecutor's office. He kept, in the Manafort instance, he kept the case.
But he didn't say exactly in court exactly what that specific evidence is.
That's right. We're going to see. So the judge ruled, T.S. Ellis ruled, that the prosecutors are going to have to turn over an unredacted portion of this August memo, the Rosenstein memo that sort of laid out the scope of the Mueller investigation, portions of which we had seen previously in other Manafort cases, but it was redacted. So the judge has said that within 2 weeks, that has to be turned over by the prosecutors in an unredacted form so that he can review it and really see whether or not this falls under that scope. It's in camera, I would like to say, meaning we're not going to get a chance to see it.
Yeah. One time I went to a lawyer, said I want to do an interview through in camera, and I showed up with the camera.
Right,
like, what am I on TV?
Yes. Different
no, it's
on
in
TV.
camera means that it's private. So bottom line is, final question. We will not see the unredacted version, do you think, or will it be leaked out?
So we shouldn't see. It's under seal. It's in camera. But I think we've been seeing throughout the course of this entire investigation that there are some leaks. I would have to think that we would at some point down the road see it. It's a question of when.
Okay, getting our legal education this Sunday afternoon. Caroline Polisi, thank you so much.